Hey folks, we're just gonna let a couple other people join. We'll get started here in another minute or two. Well, all right, let's get started. Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jim Keene. I'm one of the founders of Farron. Farron is a digital leadership company. We help companies that are in transition go where they want to go faster. We help them in a couple different ways. One is through helping them get the experienced digital leaders they need to drive projects and programs and functions forward. We do that on an interim or a project or a permanent basis. And then we also help companies work out their strategies through our team. I'm really excited to have a conversation today with Rob Silas. This is part of our Business Drivers series. This is something new that we've started. Business Drivers is what we're using to hold together our work around articles and interviews and resources for leaders that are driving their own digital transformation. And we're starting this series now just to get a chance to talk with experienced digital leaders. We have a couple events coming up that might be of interest. Later in October, we're going to be talking with Jen Swanson and Joe Ruckert about digital product leadership and how to set your digital product priorities for 2021. Amy Campbell will be talking about content planning for 2021 and how to organize and provide direction to your content team. And then we're working on a session on agile marketing later in the year. Our theme right now is around 2021 planning. A lot of the marketers that we're talking to at Farron, a lot of the business leaders we're talking to at Farron are up to their hips in 2021 planning, and it's a weird time to be planning anything, much less your next cycle. And we keep hearing a number of different themes coming up. So one is, how does a brand stay relevant in a post-COVID era? And not only relevant, but how do they stay responsive and agile? We're hearing leaders talk about the challenges of making decisions with confidence in a time where so much is changing so fast. And they want to be data-driven, but they also have to rely on their intuition. And so we keep hearing these concerns about making good decisions. We were talking to a lot of folks that are either looking to renovate their brands or innovate in their business models or innovate in their digital experience. And ultimately, the leaders that we're talking to are trying to lean into this weird time and get themselves unstuck from the habits that they've built over the years and try to apply new ways of working, new thinking, or new approaches. So we put together these conversations to help digital leaders take advantage of the weird time that we're in and get them unstuck, which brings me to the conversation that we've got today with Rob Silas. You know, Rob's going to be talking to us about how to provide some direction or guide your data team through a series of questions. And I think I can't really think of many better people that would be good to hear talk about this. I've been lucky enough to know Rob for a number of years in a couple different settings, and he's a leader whose approach to data and approach to data storytelling and helping digital marketing leaders get unstuck is really kind of unparalleled in town here. Rob's an entrepreneur and a senior leader in digital marketing analytics. He's been doing this for over 16 years. He's got the right perspective for this conversation because he's led agencies as both the president and the COO. He's a founder in digital analytics companies. He led one of the first certified Salesforce marketing cloud practices in the US. And he's been a speaker where he shared his knowledge and experience at events like Dreamforce, at the Hubbard School of Communication at Drake University. Currently, Rob's a consultant who's working with companies of all sizes, from large Fortune 500 to early stage ventures. So he knows the full gamut. And I think he's got a perspective that's going to be really useful because he's worked with both large and small data teams and done the work, everything from data cleansing to CEO dashboards. So he's seen it all top to bottom, left to right. And I couldn't think of a better guy to have talk us through here. So Rob, why don't you take over the screen and tell us what questions we should be asking our data team.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you so much. Appreciate the kind introduction and great to join you. And thanks everyone for joining here this afternoon. Really appreciate it. So as Jim said, we're going to talk about, as soon as my slideshow kicks on here, we're going to talk about 5 questions that you should be asking your data team for 2021 and 2021 planning. And, you know, as I started to think about the 5 questions, it really kind of came to me that they're really around 3 business themes that, you know, we're all really familiar with right now, especially in the current environment. So as we talk about the 5 questions, the 3 themes that I've really kind of grouped them under are, you know, first of all, how do we use data to really help in our decision making, you know, in these times of uncertainty? And, you know, I think we're all probably pretty resigned to the fact that, you know, regardless of how the landscape changes or doesn't change with COVID and other things going on around the country, we're still going to be in a pretty heavy time of uncertainty, I'm guessing, certainly through 2021. So, you know, how that's going to look, who knows, right? But the fact that we're just saying that, you know, it leads to the fact that we're going to be dealing with uncertainty. So we're going to talk about a couple of key questions to talk with your analytics team around how to use data to really support decisions during this uncertain time. Then, you know, given the situation that we're in today, we all need to be doing more with less. So we've got one question we're going to talk about in terms of just how to help your analytics team function more efficiently. And to function more efficiently, you know, using the tools and some elements of the tools that you probably already have in place today. And then if we're going to talk about efficiency, we can't really talk about efficiency without talking about effectiveness. So the last couple questions are going to be questions for your data team to really talk about, from an analysis and an insights and a data storytelling perspective, how do we become more effective? And, you know, all of us, and I've just been reading, as I'm sure a lot of you have too, you know, what all the big consulting firms are talking about in terms of, from a CEO and a CMO's perspective, what are some of the key, what are some of the key focuses now in the new environment that we're in? And executing strategy, you know, flawlessly is always a critical thing, but probably more important now than ever, given, again, the pressures that we're all under. So we'll have a couple questions that we'll talk about analytics effectiveness to help to drive more organizational effectiveness. So again, under this first theme of, you know, how do we use data to make decisions during this time of uncertainty? And, you know, what's interesting is, actually, before we jump into the question, the things we're going to talk about here, these questions, are questions that are relevant pretty much all the time, but they're really, I think, much more relevant and critical today, again, given kind of the state of where things are at. So this first one is a simple one, but it's a powerful one, and it's really where you need to start as you talk with your analytics team. And it's, you know, it's really saying, do we know our digital performance drivers? Do we know the 80/20s in our data and in our performance? And when I say that, I'm not talking about KPIs. You know, you should, and I hope that you've got KPIs set that everyone's clear on and everyone understands, and that you have targets around those KPIs. What I'm talking about when I say digital performance drivers is really the next level down. So, you know, you've got your KPIs, but what are the drivers of performance that are allowing you to kind of hit those KPIs, and that you really need to be focused on? And in most of our digital marketing data, for those of us who've been doing this for a while, you're going to find there are going to be 80/20s, or there might be 70/30s, or there might be 60/40s, but they're in the data, they're there. And why it's so critical right now to really understand this, and also to make sure you're communicating these performance drivers across the organization, because organizationally, we want our digital marketers and our digital strategists and our senior leaders to have the context and to know what those performance drivers are. So as we're having conversations around performance and around segments, we have that context of what performance has been. But the reason it's so critical to understand these performance drivers now is, we really have to look at and understand maybe they're at a channel level, they might be at a product or a service level, they might be at an audience segment level, they might be at a geo level, especially with what we're seeing in COVID and the social unrest, different impacts in different geos. We have to understand those performance drivers first, because you need to know where the 80/20s are and if they are still your 80/20s. And if you've seen that they've changed, how have they changed? And what impact has that had on the organization? And what impact does that have on your strategies? If you've seen a big shift in a channel that maybe drove 60% of your visits and 50% of your conversions, if that started to shift, well, now we need to really dig into the whys and really start to talk about what do we need to do differently to offset that shift, and also really tracking that shift. So as we've all seen through the pandemic, most companies took a big dip in March and maybe even in April. But in some cases, for a couple of my clients, they've really seen things in the higher funnel level start to come back. But while we saw higher funnel performance drivers starting to come back, the performance drivers kind of mid funnel and lower funnel, were a lot slower to respond. And now they started to respond for this particular company. It's in the medical business. But what we saw is our performance drivers, high funnel interest stayed pretty consistent. And when things started to kind of change around COVID and around different kinds of medical procedures, the lower funnel then started to come back. And so it was really having that understanding of the key performance drivers and those channels that enabled us to really figure out kind of what were the decisions that we needed to make during that time in order to kind of fill gaps, or maybe not fill gaps and kind of wait it out, and which is kind of what happened actually, until we saw lower funnel start to come back. So again, understanding your performance drivers, critical anytime, critical especially as you're going into 2021 planning, but even more so critical today in understanding again how they've changed, what has changed, and how it impacts how you need to think about your digital strategy. The second question around making decisions under uncertainty is probably a question I'm going to guess when you ask your data team. The answer likely is going to probably be no. But let's talk about the impacts of this. So the question is, do we have a clear understanding of which decisions need what I'm calling sort of heavy analysis, versus those that need light analysis? And this is one that a lot of companies may be thinking about it, or sort of maybe an inherent way of operating, but they're not thinking about it in terms of actually having a process for doing this. And where I see this having impact is, for so many companies that with all the data we have coming at us, they want to be more data driven. The inclination a lot of times is to say, well, let's dive into data for every decision we have to make. We need to be analyzing every little thing. And the fact is that can be very, very counterproductive. And it goes a lot. I'm a firm believer in sort of the Amazon decision-making model, which is a little bit represented by the grid here, right? And that we really need to understand where to leverage data and where to leverage our analysts for the decisions that have the biggest impact. And that if we're, digital marketing a lot of times is can be a very incremental sort of science, right? And that we're testing a lot of things, and that's great to do. But a lot of times the things we're testing may have small impact. And when we're going after those small impact, and especially those small impact and small effort things, you don't need to do a lot of analysis up front. You can just go and do it. And so, I talk a lot with my clients about understanding, do you have a way for kind of categorizing your impact and effort, but then aligning where you're spending your analyst time and effort against that. And that also becomes very important during this time of uncertainty, because we have to prioritize our decisions more effectively. We have to prioritize where we use our analyst time more effectively. So, if you lead an analytics team, you can also use this framework to help to push back in the business sometimes if you're getting requests for analyst time on things that may not have the biggest impact, right? So understanding and having a process, even a very simple process for categorizing impact and effort, and then aligning our data and our analyst time against that can really help us make more decisions faster, leverage our analyst time much more effectively, and get us focused on the right things. So making decisions under uncertainty, we could have a 2-hour webinar on that, but these are two of the key points that I want you thinking about in 2021. If you don't have this process in place today, it's a great time to start talking about it and getting it started. Again, even in a very simple way, to start categorizing even impact at a high, low, medium, and effort at a high, low, medium, and grid it, as you see this grid here, and then talk about how we align data resources and analyst resources against that. All right, second theme, increasing analytics efficiency. Now we're going to move into our third question, and this one is really all about how we leverage technology. And again, given the environment that we're in today, I'm trying to help clients understand within the technology that you already have at your fingertips today, how can we use it more effectively? And one of the things that you may or may not be aware of is that your core analytics tools, for most people, you're using either Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics for your web analytics tool. And even some of the dashboard tools like Domo are starting to have this built-in analytics intelligence, this built-in analysis and insights capability. And so this is a screenshot from my own Google Analytics account. But what I highlighted in the box here on the right is Google's analytics intelligence. And they've actually had this in the product for a couple of years. But it's a great way to very quickly, and you can see some of the questions that you can click on here. And behind each of these questions, whether it's around basic performance, or where you get your users from, or content analysis, they list questions that people typically ask around those categories. So around basic performance, it's going to be, what have my trends been in visits? What have my trends been in conversions and in goals? And when you click on those questions, it'll go in and give you a trend chart that'll quickly show you what that performances look like. So as we think about how to be more efficient and how to get more done with less, and from an analyst perspective, how to wade through all the data that you've got to get through in a given day to really understand what performance looks like and what trends you're seeing in user behaviors. This is a great little functionality to use, and I use it all the time to start to guide me to figure out what are the lanes I need to go down if I'm not aware of them, or if I'm on a site that I haven't been on for a long time or for some period of time, to get me back reacquainted with where things are at, to know where to dig in. It's a really great tool. And Adobe has something very similar, and as I mentioned, Domo actually does as well. So as you're looking at the tools that you have, where there's the ability to leverage automated insights that aren't going to give you necessarily the complete answer that you need. You're still going to have analysts going in and doing work, but to start to shorten the path to getting to those key nuggets and those key insights, make sure you're aware of this kind of functionality that are in the tools that you have today, and make sure that you're leveraging those and that your team is leveraging those. And the great thing about this is there's other third-party tools in the market right now, tools like narrative science and automated insights that can automate any really corpus of data that you have and give you automated insights in a written format. And the sophistication, as we all know, of those tools is becoming more and more, and they're becoming very useful. But if you can start to build a process around using what you have and the tools you have today and leveraging that in the right way, it'll start to set you up for looking at how you use those automated insights tools, those third-party tools that can give you a broader scope around automated insights as you go forward in 2021. So again, this is something you can start doing right now, but start asking your data team, what are you leveraging within the tools we have today for automated insights? And if they're not sure, or if they're not, make sure they're getting into it, understanding it, starting to bring those into their processes to improve their efficiency. Our third theme, we shift now from efficiency into effectiveness. Question number 4 is a question that we're always asking ourselves, right? And that is, from an analytics team perspective, how do we make our deliverables and our analyses easier for the business to understand? And this is something that should always be a part and parcel of what we're doing. It's, again, in my opinion, more critical now than it's ever been, because we as analytics professionals and insights professionals have to be delivering on point, on spot, relevant, quick to ingest types of insights and stories that can be used to make decisions. So this whole notion of how can we make it easier for the business to understand, again, is more critical now than ever. So I love to just talk about, senior leaders across the business, and it really kind of at all levels, what do they want? They really want to hit the easy button, right? They want all the data. They want to know that we've had a lot of rigor around our data and how we put it together. But in terms of what it's telling us, they want us just to tell us what it is. And I think too many times still, when I work with clients, I see dashboards or reports that have just a ton of complexity in them. And the work is great, But the reality is the people that we're communicating to, the audience that we're communicating to, that you need to be aware of and aware of how they learn, it's going to overwhelm them, right? So we need to always start with the audience in mind, understand what their objectives are, understand and ask some questions to understand how they really learn and how they like to ingest things. And it's going to be visual. Sometimes it can even be audio. We can start to insert little videos in our PowerPoints to explain things. We have to send them out to make it easier. There's a lot of different things we can do there. And one of the other onuses I'm going to put is on senior leaders, because the other thing that I feel like I see too much of when I'm out dealing with all different kinds of clients is that we see a lot of times dashboards that have a lot of complexity and that's great from a functionality perspective, but they're hard to, they're hard to understand and they're hard to use. Or we see analyses that go really deep into the just the different segmentations of data and kind of lose the forest for the trees. And I don't see enough senior leaders that see those, and it's obvious that they're too complex, but they're not calling it out. So one of the things that kind of the second bullet point I've got here in this slide in terms of how do we increase our effectiveness and make these deliverables easier to understand is to inspect what you expect. That old saying is still so true here, and be transparent about it. As an organization, we have to be okay if we look at an analysis, we look at a dashboard and say, hey, great data, but we really need to improve the presentation here because we're just having a hard time understanding it. We can't get to the story, and therefore we get sidetracked because we're spending a lot of time trying to figure it out instead of taking action. And one of the simplest ways to do this, and if those of you who've heard me speak before, I've been talking about the 3 whats for years, but it's still a great framework to think about. So as you're talking to your analytics team, and if you're looking at what you're doing and saying, yes, we've got to simplify this, one of the great, most consistent ways to enforce it and to really get people to aware of, are they doing this in a way that's easy to understand or not, is to really use the what, so what, now what framework. And that every analysis that you're seeing and every dashboard that you're seeing should quickly lead you to be able to answer all 3 of those questions. What's happening? What's the data telling us? What has performance been? So what? What's important? Are we bringing people's eyes and their attention to the key things that really caused the what's, that caused performance or behaviors to be what they are? And is it easy to get at those? And are they very prevalent in the presentation? And then the now what's, and the now what's get to the last bullet point here. The now what's are, what do we do next? What are the next steps? How does this impact our strategy? How does it impact our optimization? And the thing we have to make sure we're doing here, which again is a very simple thing, but I feel like many times gets missed, is collaboration is so key here. And I think as we've seen organizations grow and we've seen data expand faster and faster, we tend to sometimes compartmentalize analytics where analytics is running reports and they're blasting great dashboards out there, but then they're kind of thrown over the transom to the strategy team or to the digital marketers, and there's not a lot of collaboration between the 2 groups that give the analytics team the context they need to help shape the data the right way, and on the flip side, not giving the digital marketers the context that they need to truly understand and derive value from the analysis. So that collaboration is critical. It's obvious. We all know it's a critical thing, but there's great simple ways to do that. I work with an agency right now that makes great use of Google Docs and Google Slides and Google Sheets to collaborate on analysis and to collaborate on different dashboards as they're putting them out there. And even just simple collaboration tools like that can really foster that collaborative environment and enable you to really pull insights together that much faster, through that collaboration. So again, this is a tried and true thing that we want to be doing all the time, but especially in the environment that we're in today, being able to really start to look at how we're doing things. And there's no better time than right now, frankly, than to really take that step back and for 2021, do a really thorough analysis of what you're putting out there from a reporting and a dashboard and an analysis perspective, and really put a critical eye on, are we driving people to the easy button where it's easy to understand? And if you're not, then change it, and think about, at least at a minimum, the what, so what, now what framework to help you get there. And finally, around effectiveness, let's talk a little bit about just personnel. And do we have, on the analytics team, do we have the right people aligned to the right roles? And again, this is a topic we could spend, we could spend hours on. And for me, it's one of the most interesting ones that I love to dive into with clients as well. And what you'll see here is just an example of some of the different kinds of roles that you can have on an analytics team. And we all know, and we all laugh, and there's memes out there about job descriptions that are looking for the unicorn that does all these things and does them all together, right? And we all know that those unicorns are really hard to find, and a lot of times they don't really exist, and that's going to change over time. As I talk to even students in college and people are just coming out of school, the types of experiences that they're having is naturally going to start to kind of cross train them to do these things more effectively in time. But today, again, we don't have a lot of unicorns, and I think the one place that I feel like we don't have enough discussion that I'm going to challenge all of you to take a look at as you're looking at 2021 and the outputs and the effectiveness of your digital analytics team is really looking at the people that you've got doing reporting versus the people you have doing analysis. And many times, I think we make this implicit assumption in the organization that the people that are good reporting people are the people that are going to do our analysis and that they're good analysts. And the reality is, many times that can be pretty far from the truth. And while we do find good reporting people that are also good analysts and insights people, a lot of times there are two separate skill sets. So as you think about 2021 and improving the effectiveness of your analytics team and getting those great analyses and insights that can drive you to better decisions faster, do this little test, because there's kind of 4 things that I look for to try and ascertain behaviorally, is someone more, and skill set wise, is someone stronger in reporting or on the analysis side? So let me tick through these really quick. The first one is, analysts have a level of curiosity. They want to dig in deeper. They want to understand the whys behind things and what's going on. Many times people that are great reporting people really are, they want to get the work done. They want to get the report done and get it out there. They don't have that same level of curiosity to be looking at performance and the whys. So that's one thing to look for. The second thing, again, which is very simple, is looking at trend versus point in time data. And I can't tell you how often still, when I look at dashboards and reports and analysis, that I don't see a lot of trend data. I see a lot of point in time data. And that's typically true of people that are really good reporting people that aren't always thinking about kind of the deeper part of analysis and setting context, right? So looking at trend versus point data. From a presentation side of things, are people doing the classic, what we call reading the news, right? Where they're kind of just reading the slides and what's on the slides, or are they telling the story, the behavioral story, around what's happening, and architecting a story in a way that the audience can understand? That's another key thing I look for. And then the last one is something that that actually I even find myself guilty of a lot of times, and good analysts can even be guilty of doing this. But definitely people that are good at reporting and may not be as strong on the analysis side, tend to what I'm going to do here, talk about right away, which is, people that when they start a presentation and are presenting results, when they start with heavy duty on talking about data assumptions, they start talking about how they marry data together, and maybe what some of the challenges were, and maybe where some of the gaps were in the data, that's really critical for people that are doing data cleansing and reporting. Absolutely, it's got to be done. But from a presentation perspective, when you start there, it's been a proven kind of scientifically studied fact that when you start to talk about those things, you start to talk about analytical things with any audience, doesn't matter who they are and what their skill sets are, that's going to trigger their analytical brain. And when you trigger the analytical brain, what you start to trigger then is people looking at what you're saying, and they start to evaluate it, and they start to analyze it. And that's when they start to poke holes in it. We've all been in too many of those presentations where you have a great analysis, you go to present it, and the first thing you start hearing from a senior leader is, hey, that number looks wrong. Or well, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't tie together over here, right? And we all know that can be frustrating because it'll derail the conversation. Well, the reason that's happened, if you reflect on it, and I've done this myself, is more than likely you've started the conversation in a very analytical way, and you've triggered their analytical brain. And when that happens, if you're in a meeting where you want to get to decisions and talk about what you're seeing in data and move towards decisions, It's going to be very hard to do that once you've triggered that analytical brain. So reporting people a lot of times like to start there. The good analysts and insights people, what you're going to see them do is they're going to start by really jumping into context setting, and they're going to start with story. They're going to start with objectives. They're going to start with things that may involve the data but aren't going right hard at the data, but really giving you the story around the data, kind of position things to talk about data points later in the conversation. And whether they realize it or not, those kinds of conversations and approaching it that way is what you see out of good analysts and storytelling people to get you and enable you to get to decisions in the conversation. So a few points to think about as you are looking at your reporting and analysis talent that you have and the staff that you have, and really look at this and think about it as you think about your 2021 planning and are looking at your staffing to say, are we expecting our reporting people to really do our analysis? And have we maybe had some frustrations because we haven't been getting where we want to be, but it's really because our reporting people are awesome reporting people and they don't have maybe some of the skill sets that they need to do that kind of analysis. And if that's the case, then you need to figure out skill-wise where to get those things to be able to create that analysis. And again, make your analytics team a lot more effective in what they're producing and delivering, which will obviously just help you move the business forward faster. So those are the 5 key questions I want you thinking about for 2021. Some are related to data as we talk about performance drivers. A lot of them are related to just process and how you think about staff, which I think is exactly what you need to be looking at in the environment that we're in today. It's a great time to be really shining a light on these things in the organization. And if you need to make changes and you need to shuffle the deck a little bit, this is absolutely, in my opinion, the right time to start doing that as we're looking at 2021 planning. Jim, I will stop the share and we will pause for questions.
That was great, Rob. Thank you so much. Wow, there's a lot in there. So again, thank you very much. I guess I want to start with sort of a broader question. As you're talking to folks, as you're working with data teams, are you noticing any differences in the way the teams are working now, and how should that change as people are setting their 2021 plans? And I guess I'm kind of in my own head thinking about, are more teams moving to a more agile model? Are they moving to Scrum versus monthly plans? Like, what are you seeing in differently in the way that teams are actually working?
Yeah, interestingly, I'd say it's kind of a mixed bag. I wish I could say to you that I've seen a big shift in terms of how teams are working, but I really think that which is part of the reason I brought up some of the process and kind of organizational issues as we think about 2021, because I still think we're in that mode with data and analytics where that feeling of kind of pressure and feeling that we need to get better at what we're delivering, that has obviously been really ratcheted up. And I'm not sure that the teams and leaders have really had the chance to take a step back yet and figure out really how to improve it, right? Mm-hmm. And so while there are some organizations I've worked with that moved to Agile, I saw strong move to Agile in a couple of places I was working with in 2019, where they really had some great results, but really had to focus on it, right? And had resources that were dedicated to training marketers on how to do Agile, and dove all in on it too, by the way, right? They fired up a bunch of different Agile projects, really kind of side by side against one another, and for the most part worked pretty well. So that was something I saw in 2019 that has continued into 2020. But I think given kind of where we've been with everything going on, I haven't seen a lot of behavior change in 2020 because people have still been kind of scrambling to figure out how to make do with kind of what they have, right? And so that's where, again, kind of some of the things I teed up for 2021, I think now is, while we're still all scrambling, I think people are realizing we have to think about doing business differently, right? And the simple thing has been obviously around digital transformation, that the shift in how we're working, but now let's move past that and talk about process wise, how do we develop processes that enable us, to your point, Jim, to be more agile and to be more efficient and more effective at the same time.
Yep. Got it. So let me ask you a harder question that I think might be on the mind of a lot of people that are looking ahead to 2021. If you're running a data team, or if you're running the data and analytics function or the reporting function, what are the budget shifts that you're making? Like where are you moving your money from, where, and to what? And how big of a bet or how big of a move should people be making?
That is a hard question.
Hey man, that's why you're here.
Throw it in a couple of categories. If you're a larger enterprise, I think you really need to take a look at how effective have you been in distributing data, and how effective have you been around kind of data democracy, and getting data in people's hands. And that's really got to be, I think, where it starts, but very quickly followed by, if you're a large organization and you haven't done a good job with getting data out in people's hands, I would say you might be a little bit of an advantage right now, because you need to move towards that. But as you move towards it, you need to have the right things in place to help people understand how to use that data, right? So, I mean, I'd be in that situation, I'd be placing my big bet on, first of all, let's get the right dashboarding tool out there, or let's get better utilization of it. But let's at the same time figure out how we couple it, with insights technology or training to really help people get through it and understand what's there. Because that's still the biggest need I see in organizations is, whether you have data out there or not, really understanding how to interpret it, quickly and effectively now becomes the challenge, right? So, so if you don't have the data out there, start with that. If you do, then the big bet is, again, how do we help people to get through this faster, get through the data faster, and get to those key insights more quickly and more efficiently. And there's a couple ways to tackle that. I'd be placing bets on, looking at, first of all, as I mentioned, in the tools you have, what kind of automated insights functionality is there? And then also, looking at the tools like a narrative science happens to be, one of the ones that I think is one of the better ones out there that can ingest a lot of different kinds of data and start to even give you written context, and not just this was up and this was down, but their AI technology will start to relationally kind of tell you what has started to cause those things. So I'd be looking at that kind of technology. But before you put that in place, the first thing I would do around analysis and insights, which I think most companies are lacking, is identify, for a given business objective, what are the top 3 or 4 analyses we have to be doing all the time to understand what's going on here, and have a process for creating them and delivering them. You have to have that before you can get any leverage from the technology. And so I'd be placing my big bet on really understanding that. What are those 3 or 4 analyses we have to do given different business objectives, and different business units might have different marketing objectives, right? But it kind of gets back to that golden data set mentality. What are those KPIs, supporting metrics, and 3 or 4 analyses we need to be doing? Let's get those in place and do that right away. So that's where I go.
All right, last question. I'm going to put you in the spot a little bit. Pretend like that you've got a team around you. How do you coach somebody from being a good reader of the news to a good storyteller?
Yeah,
that's a theme that came through your talk. It's like, you got to be able to tell a good story. How do you coach somebody that only reads the news to be a good storyteller?
Yeah, the first thing you have to do, really, honestly, is sort of assess that person from a skill sets perspective, as well as from a motivational perspective, because there's a lot of people, and we all probably know a number of folks are this way, that are great at cleaning data, at integrating data, they may even be really great at visualizing it in a dashboard tool and creating it, but they may not be that interested in it, right? So it may not be that interested in looking at what's behind it and understanding the whys and telling that story. So obviously that's the first thing. But if if we think they have the skill sets and they have the motivation to do it, where I start with them is actually some of the things I talked about a few minutes ago, which is, let's help you understand as we look at this business, and maybe we start with a specific campaign, or we look at the marketing performance for a certain division. Let's start to educate you on, first of all, what are those performance drivers? What are the 80/20s in the data? What are the trends that we see that are very prevalent, and really help them understand kind of how the business works and how the business model works from a digital perspective, from awareness, to come to the website, to whatever conversions or engagement you're looking at. Help them understand that big picture and what that performance looks like. And once we do that, then I can start to educate on how to tell the story. And how to tell the story is all about setting that context that I just talked about, repeating that context, understanding where the business is trying to go. So if they don't understand that today, let's connect them with the right business leaders and marketing people to help them understand that. Let's reinforce that with them. And then there's really helping them understand how to actually tell the story, which is at a base level, who's our audience? As I mentioned before, how do they like to consume? How do they consume information? You really need to understand that. Ask those questions. It's going to be different in every situation. And then you can start to use that to craft the story, and then really go through it with them, and rehearse with them, and make them rehearse, make them go through it, and coach them through that process. So those are the steps that I typically take people through.
Great. Rob, thank you so much for doing this. Actually, I just want to ask, hey folks, you can use the chat function to ask a question. I just asked a couple, and just want to take a minute to see if anyone's got any questions for Rob or me, but probably for Rob. I'll ask you one quick hit question, Rob.
Yeah, shoot.
What is one emerging tool that you haven't mentioned yet that anyone that is focused on data should pay attention to?
Well, I'm probably not the answer you're looking for. As I said, the one that I'm hottest on, as I mentioned a couple of times, is narrative science, and I've only evaluated them in automated insights. I really liked what I saw there.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of tool that, like for my business, I'm trying to partner with them, to help them come on a services side, because it seems to me to be all the tools that are out there, the one that really does a great job with this really hard space of automated insights. And I think there's a lot of not so great tools out there in that arena. But it's a good one, and it's one where I'm looking to place some bets.
Awesome. Well, hey Rob, thank you so much for doing this. You got my brain turned inside out a little bit on a couple things in a good way. You got me thinking. So I really appreciate it. And just want to let everyone else know we've got a couple other events coming up later this month. One is on product teams and product planning for 2021, and the other one's on content strategy and getting your content team aligned for 2021. So pay attention and look for those, and follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Silas, and follow Farron at Hello Farron on Twitter. And we hope to see you guys all soon. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Rob.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Jim.